In the study of Indus Valley Civilization, one topic out of many that has not been resolved yet is the presence of ruling elites. In this video, we will try to understand this debate that has been going on for more than 100 years. Now, if we look at the works of early historians and archaeologists who were the first to study this civilization, for them, the answer to this question, whether there were ruling elites in Indus Valley Civilization or not, for them, the answer to this question was pretty straightforward. They argued that because in the Indus case we see that cities were emerging, then it naturally meant that this civilization must have ruling elites as well. They drew this conclusion based on the studies of other civilizations that were contemporary to the mature phase of Harappan civilization. So based on the study of civilizations like the ancient Mesopotamian civilization and the civilization of ancient Egypt, these scholars believed that with the emergence of cities, we see that political hierarchies also emerged. So in their view, the rise of cities coincides with the emergence of ruling elite. So this whole framework they applied to the Indus case as well. Because we see that in Indus Valley Civilization there were cities, then it naturally meant that Indus Valley Civilization must have ruling elites as well. So this was their broader conclusion. However, there was a problem in this conclusion. The great tombs that we see in ancient Mesopotamia or in ancient Egypt is absent in the case of Indus Valley Civilization. To solve this conundrum, they took the help of a statite sculpture that was 17.5 centimeter high. This sculpture was found in Mohenjo-daro, and scholars who advocated the presence of a ruling class identified this sculpture with an individual who once ruled the entire IVC state. It was a British archaeologist, Mortimer Wheeler, who argued that this sculpture was the sculpture of a priest king. And this priest king enjoyed the same status which an Egyptian pharaoh would have enjoyed. According to scholars like Mortimer Wheeler, the priest king ruled a state that was centrally organized, and the central authority of this priest king rested upon his control over the agricultural production. To prove that this priest king had control over agricultural production, these scholars identified a structure that was found in Harappa as a granary, and they argued that the agricultural production that was happening in the villages of Indus Valley Civilization were brought to the cities, and in cities these agricultural production were stored in granaries. These granaries were under the control of the priest king. So you can see that how one speculation is giving birth to another speculation. First, these scholars identified a sculpture with that of a priest king. Now, we do not know whether there was any priest king or not, but these scholars identified a certain sculpture with that of a priest king. Now, then they went on to speculate that a structure that was found in Harappa was a granary, and this supposed granary was under the control of a supposed priest king. So you can see how one speculation is giving birth to another speculation. Now, there are also other evidence which these scholars put forward to show that the Indus Valley Civilization had a central authority. And the most important evidence was the homogeneity of the material culture. Now, let's unpack this, loaded term, homogeneity of material culture. So, first of all, we find that the Indus Valley Civilization covered a vast landmass from Afghanistan to eastern UP and then from Jammu to Gujarat. So this was a huge area which Indus Valley Civilization covered. And in this vast area, we find that the pottery, the script, the weight and measurement and decorations are more or less the same. The homogeneity of the material culture here is the sameness of archaeological evidence like pottery, weight and measures, etc. that are found in the vast area of the Indus Valley Civilization. Now, one question which naturally arises because of this homogeneity is, who was this individual, group or institution that enforced or maintained this homogeneity? Now let's understand this point with an example. We are finding pottery that belonged to Indus Valley Civilization from eastern UP and Pakistani Punjab as well. These two potteries that are found from these two different regions are made in a similar fashion, and the decoration that is used is also the same. So there has to be some authority that is enforcing how pottery should be produced. So for these scholars, the answer to this question was pretty straightforward. It was a central authority that was under the priest king who, enforced and maintained this homogeneity of material culture. These scholars also believed that the Indus Valley Civilization had twin capitals, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. The idea of twin capitals was based on the fact that during the early years, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were two main cities, and since their layout was more or less the same, the conclusion was pretty straightforward. Now, all of these arguments would have us believe that there must be a historical consensus on the presence of ruling elites in IVC. But that is not what we find. There are new scholars who reject this whole assumption. They base their arguments on new excavations and by drawing new conclusions on existing evidence. One such example of drawing new conclusions from existing evidence is the perception about Harappan granary. We all know that early scholars believed that this structure was a granary. But in the studies that were done later, we have not found a single grain in and around this structure. So, based on this structure was anything but a granary. And this also collapses the whole argument of early scholars that this structure was a granary and this granary was under the control of priest king, and this shows that the priest king controlled the agricultural production of IVC. So all of these arguments just fall flat. These new scholars also argue that the size of Harappan settlements also raises question on the presence of ruling elite. We know that if there is a ruling elite in a particular culture, then the structures that are associated with this ruling elite would be quite large. The best example of this comes from ancient Egypt, where the tombs of pharaohs were considerably larger than any structure that belonged to an ordinary person. But in the Indus case, we have not found any such structure. Even if we compare the size of largest house and the smallest house, this difference is also quite insignificant. For example, in the case of Mohenjo-daro, we find that the smallest house has an area of 97 square meters, whereas the average size of 5 largest houses of Mohenjo-daro has an average area of 183 square meters. So we can see that the size difference between the smallest house and the largest house is not that significant. These largest houses are in no way comparable to the royal palaces of ancient Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt. Even other structures of Indus Valley Civilization cannot be associated with ruling elites. Most of these structures were public structures. Now one can argue that the elite of Indus Valley Civilization showed their status by possessing material goods like precious items, for example gold, carnelian beads, or the famous Indus seals. Even here, we have not found certain structures that yield a significantly larger amount of these material goods compared to other structures. So it is not like we have found a house where the amount of Indus seals that were found are considerably larger than other houses. So we can identify that this was the house of a ruling elite. So this we have not found. So it would be hard for us to say that material goods were a way by which the ruling elite of the Indus Valley Civilization showed their status. Now, one can also argue that the elites of the Indus Valley Civilization showed their status through burial practices. For example, we all know that in the Egyptian case, the tomb of the pharaoh contained great amount of precious items. But in the case of Indus Valley Civilization, we have not found any such tomb as of yet. Now, one can also argue that the elites of Indus Valley Civilization were cremated, whereas the ordinary person were buried. But even here, we have not found any evidence of this practice of cremation. So this, whole theory also does not stand. So all of these evidence point to the fact that the usual markers that differentiated the ruling elites from common folks that were present in other civilization were absent in the Indus case. In other civilization, the ruling elite built royal palaces or great tombs. But the Indus civilization had none of these. This could mean only two things. Either the Indus civilization was an egalitarian civilization and there was no ruling elite. Or it could mean that the marker through which the ruling elite differentiated itself from the ordinary folks is not understood by us today. Maybe in future, with new discoveries, we can understand how the ruling elite differentiated itself. Now, there is also a third possibility that the Indus Valley Civilization had great tombs or great palaces. We have just not found them yet. Now, this is a possibility which I personally find it hard to believe, but as the famous saying goes, the absence of evidence is not an evidence of absence. So, maybe in future discoveries, we could discover a royal tomb or a royal palace. Now, about this topic, I have also done a podcast which you can listen here, where I have gone through the different arguments of various scholars in detail. If you like this channel, do subscribe. Thank you for watching.